Hello guys, today I'm going to make the follow-up video for the intermediate guide to Control Warrior. I put out a beginner's guide highlighting the most simple parts of Control Warrior so far, and now I would like to highlight the intermediate part. So what I'm going to talk about now is, on the one hand, which cards I'm putting in my deck here and why, which will help you a little bit more in the matchups, and then I'll give a mulligan guide for pretty much every single one of the decks that you might face on ladder. And I'll probably make a third video with like some super interesting tips and tricks that you never really come across, but they will be able to help and perfect your Control Warrior gameplay. All right, so I want to start out with highlighting a few cards in the list. The first one, I'm playing a Kazakhstan build, but I prefer a build with one Amalgam and not a second Amalgam and a Ravager, which allows me to play a little bit more tech cards. The tech cards that I'm playing here are Rustroad Viper, which is a very good tool against the other Control Warriors, as well as Smothering Starfish, which has a bunch of different usages. The most important usages are against other Control Warriors on the Nelly board. Having this allows you to play a little bit differently. If your opponent doesn't run Starfish, the Nelly becomes even more strong. So that's why I like it as an inclusion. It also helps quite a lot against Naga Weak Priest. And then as the last tech card that I've put in my deck, I've decided to run a Rancor. On ladder, you've currently seen a little bit more Demon Hunter, and Demon Hunter has the tendency to make some really wide early boards that are kind of difficult for the warrior to answer. And if you have a Rancor copy in your deck, you can profit quite well of these wider boards. There are other Control Warrior versions out there that play the 8-drop. You can run Tidal Revenant and Alexstrasza and drop the Kazakhstan win condition, but for now I'm going to focus on this specific list. Alright, let's get to the mulligan. As I already mentioned in the beginner video, From the Depths, Outrider's Axe, those are the cards you always want to keep. Outrider's Axe being the super important part of your draw engine, and From the Depths being, of course, insane mana cheat, especially if you can get Sir Finley, the Sea Guide. Okay, so those, of course, are the cards that we'll always keep. I won't mention them any further. For all intents and purposes, I think Shield Block is an always keep card as well, so I'm not going to mention it when we go through the matchups, because it'll just be too repetitive, and yeah, it'll just save us some time when we go through the different matchups. Alright, so let's go and see what are the different matchups. We can start out with, first and foremost, the Rogue matchup that you encounter the most on ladder. And in addition to the cards that I said we always keep, I like to also keep a Shield Shatter. Shield Shatter is a really important piece to be able to deal with the Rogue sport. So if you feel like your opponent might be a Rogue, this is a pretty good addition. I don't really like keeping any other cards. You can keep, for example, Frozen Buckler if you already have a Shield Shatter. And of course, keeping Finley together with Depths is always a great idea. These are the only parts that are a little bit different for the Rogue matchup. A little tip that I want to give here is, like, you shouldn't be too afraid to use your clears too early, and sometimes you can set up a really nice Onyxian Drake. If you clear early and you manage to have like a few armor left over, you'll often be able to clear the Rogue's next threat with an Onyxian Drake. Especially into turn 6 and turn 5. In turn 5 they can play the boat, which is good development, but on turn 6 they oftentimes don't really have good development tool. They don't want to apply the crab into an Krakatoa into an empty board, because it just gets dealt with so easily and they lose a lot of damage, because in the end they just want to push damage. Alright, let's get over to the next matchup. The next matchup I want to talk about a little bit is Control Warrior. For Control Warrior, the matchup is pretty much the same in terms of mulligan. There isn't really too much you want to keep. Try to keep your Kazakhstan safe from your opponent's Mutinous. That means if you have it in hand, you can often serve Finley it away and put it back in your deck. It makes it much easier to plan. Other than that, I like using From the Depths later in this matchup rather than on turn 3, because against Control Warrior you very rarely die early on. So you want to have information about the cards in your hand. So for example, if you have a shield block and a From the Depths in your hand on turn 3, I like to play the shield block first because it'll give me more information about the cards I'll have in my hand when I play From the Depths. And then I can decide which combo cards I want to have. The important combos here are Fortune Flame together with Rokara or another weapon. Or if you already have like Bran, School Teacher, Mutinous. These cards are cards that synergize very well. So if you play From the Depths early and you don't really have any of the other cards that want to be activated in your hand already, you don't know what you'll be top decking and what combination of cards you want to play. Most of your power plays come on turn 7, 8, or 9, so they come quite late in the game. Meaning, it's fine for you to not really tempo out all your resources and go in early. Okay, next up, I want to talk about Naga Mage. Naga Mage is also a deck that you fight quite a lot on ladder, and here one of the other cards you always keep is Shield Shatter. It's really important if they make their really big Naga all-in board that you're able to Shield Shatter their board away. So Shield Shatter becomes an additional keep. Even if you don't have armor cards, you're so likely to get some that it's oftentimes good to be keeping Shield Shatter. Other than that, your mulligan stays pretty much the same. A short tip for the matchup is that you would like to kill them. You don't often outlast them, most of the time you kill them. That means after they've played their second Naga ping board, Raid Boss Elixir becomes insane, because they usually don't have enough resources to deal with it, and then you can push 20 damage the next turn. Alright, that is especially true for the non-ping version. The ping version has a few more board clears that the non-ping version doesn't have. Next up, I want to talk about Naga Weak Priest. Against Naga Weak Priest, one of the cards you want to keep here is Smothering Starfish, because it's one of the few ways you can deal with their early board. Of course, Mulligan kind of stays the same as before. The matchup is not that easy, yeah, but don't be afraid to keep Smothering Starfish if you have an idea it might be Naga Weak Priest. On the other hand, you have Boar Priest. Boar Priest is a really, really bad matchup. The only way you really win is by stacking a lot of armor and then getting 0 mana Viper. There's two ways that you can get a 0 mana Viper against Boar Priest. The first one is, of course, play From the Depths and get lucky. The second one is if you keep Finley in your hand, you want to keep Finley in your mulligan against Boar Priest. And as soon as you draw the Viper on the rightmost side of your hand, if you play Sir Finley, your hand will get shuffled into your deck with the rightmost card being the bottom card of your deck. That means the Viper will be the bottom card of your deck. So as soon as you then find another From the Depths from your deck, maybe through the Finley shuffle, maybe through a School Teacher, you'll be able to guarantee yourself a 0 mana Viper, which can then help you win against the Boar Priest. In the meanwhile, you're going to have to stack a lot of armor, so I personally like keeping Bran Bronze Spirit against these decks as well. Then I want to say against Demon Hunter, which is one of the more popular matchups that has been coming up recently, I also like to keep Shield Slam. Shield Slam is important to be able to deal with the 2-drops that Demon Hunter has and that can run quite rampant if they're not being answered too early, especially their card draw and the guy that spawns 1/1s. They are really, really pesky if you don't deal with them immediately. And they don't have that many early game threats other than these 2-drops. So being able to Shield Slam, just armor up Shield Slamming a 2-drop is quite effective. It's really, really useful. And of course you keep Rancor, because if they go wide on board, playing Rancor into these cards is really nice. And this is really important. The rest of the mulligan stays the same whenever keeping any of the important expensive cards. You can't keep Shield Shatter because you're going to need it at some point. But if your hand is really, really bad otherwise, I don't always recommend it. This is more of a judgment call. This is a more likely keep than not keep card against Demon Hunter, because you're going to have to answer their board eventually. And I think those are like the most important matchups I want to cover If you have some more questions about different matchups that you frequently encounter on ladder, feel free to either drop them as comments below the video, and I'll do my best to give you some more specific Mulligan advice on these. Or you can just come by the stream and ask the questions there, and I'm always happy to answer any questions. I hope I didn't miss any too important matchups of things that are being currently run on Rogue on the ladder. So this is kind of my intermediate guide part of of the Control Warrior guide, and then we'll get to like more specific tips and tricks on especially the Control Warrior mirror and some really funny interactions later in the game. One thing that I want to highlight against a lot of the decks is if you have the chance to play Nelly the Great Thresher without dying, it's often a really good option. Even if it's not the optimal play and you're going to have to take some damage, playing Nelly gives you a lot of tempo back and lets you overwhelm your opponent afterwards.